4:30 in the morning, while the world slept, I was already on the court, the sound of my basketball echoing through the empty gym. Bounce, bounce, swish. For 20 years, people watched me perform, but nobody saw what really made me who I was. They saw the results, the 5 championships, the 81-point game, the final 60-point farewell. But they never saw the darkness I stepped into every single morning, long before the cameras turned on. You think the Mamba mentality is about basketball? It never was. Basketball was just the canvas. The mind was always the masterpiece. I remember the moment everything changed for me. I was 17, sitting in my high school gym after missing the game-winning shot. Everyone had gone home. The janitor had turned off half the lights, signaling it was time to leave, but I couldn't move. That night, I made a decision that would separate me from everyone else. While others played the game, I would become the game. While others practiced until they got it right, I would practice until I couldn't get it wrong. What I discovered during those early morning sessions wasn't just about perfecting a jump shot. I uncovered something most people spend their entire lives never finding: the hidden power that exists in the space between obsession and surrender. Let me tell you something nobody wants to hear. Your greatest opponent isn't across from you. It's staring back at you in the mirror every morning. The face that tells you good enough is enough. The voice that whispers nobody else is working this hard, why should you? That opponent defeated more potential than any defense I ever faced. When I tore my Achilles and the doctors told me I might never play at the same level again, I didn't just face physical pain. I came face to face with my own mortality. The world expected me to break. The narrative was already written, but they didn't understand what I had built inside my mind during those thousands of morning hours when nobody was watching. The techniques I'm about to share with you aren't just about becoming better at what you do. They're about becoming someone else entirely, someone most people will never have the courage to become. The journey begins with a single question that most are afraid to answer honestly. How much are you willing to sacrifice to become who you claim to want to be? Most people think greatness is about what you do when everyone is watching. They're wrong. It's about what you do in the dark room, that mental space where no one sees you, no one validates you, and no one pushes you but yourself. My first forbidden technique begins here in what I call the dark room protocol. When I was 19, I had a conversation with Michael Jordan that changed everything for me. We weren't on camera, no journalists, just two competitors talking in an empty locker room. He looked at me and said, "Kobe, talent might get you to the top, but only character keeps you there." What he didn't tell me was that building that character would require me to create a psychological space most people never enter. The dark room is where you confront yourself without filters, without excuses, without the comfort of outside validation. It's where I went every morning at 4 a.m. when my body begged for sleep, when my mind created 1,000 reasonable excuses to take a day off. The technique is simple but brutal. You must deliberately put yourself in situations where the only thing between success and failure is your own mental fortitude. For me, it was taking 500 shots before breakfast every day, regardless of how I felt. It was studying film till my eyes burned. It was practicing defensive slides until my legs gave out, then doing 10 more. But here's what separates this from simple hard work. I learned to observe myself during these moments of extreme discomfort, not just push through pain, but study my relationship with it. When your lungs are burning and your muscles are screaming, there's a voice that says, enough. Most people obey that voice. The forbidden technique is to become fascinated by it instead, to study it with detached curiosity. Interesting. My body thinks we're done. What happens if I go further? This isn't about ignoring pain. It's about transcending your relationship with it. I remember one training session after tearing a ligament in my wrist. The doctors advised rest. Instead, I trained left-handed for weeks. When I couldn't shoot, I practiced footwork. When I couldn't run, I worked on my mental game. The darkroom protocol isn't just about physical training. It's about removing the concept of optimal conditions from your psychology entirely. The moment you accept that perfect conditions don't exist, you access a level of mental freedom your competition will never know. This is where the first transformation occurs, when you stop seeing discipline as something you do and start recognizing it as something you become. When discipline isn't a choice anymore, but your default state of being. But remember, the dark room isn't about punishment. It's about honest self-assessment and responding to that assessment with action, not emotion. Because in the dark, with no one watching, you discover who you really are. And more importantly, you begin the process of becoming who you need to be. Everyone remembers the moments, the game winners, the championships, the celebratory roars. But the true power of the Mamba mentality isn't found in those highlights. It's found in the second forbidden technique I developed, the assassin's mindset. This isn't about being aggressive or intimidating. It's about achieving a state of complete mental clarity that most people never experience. The court was always my laboratory. During a playoff game against the Spurs in 2001, I discovered something that would become central to my mental approach. With 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, down by 7 points, time slowed down. The crowd noise faded. Even my heartbeat seemed to quiet. I wasn't thinking about the score, the pressure, or even the outcome. I was completely present in each microsecond as it unfolded. This wasn't some mystical experience. It was the result of training my mind to eliminate what I call thought static, the background noise of doubt, hope, expectation, and distraction that clouds most people's performance. The technique begins with understanding a crucial truth. Your mind can only hold one thought at a time. Most people fill that space with worry about the future or regret about the past. The assassin's mindset is about claiming that mental space entirely for the present moment. I developed a specific routine before every high-pressure situation. 3 deep breaths, not to relax, but to center my awareness. Then I would focus on one physical sensation, the feeling of the ball's texture, the sound of my heartbeat, the rhythm of my breathing. This creates an anchor in the present moment. From this anchor, I could execute with a clarity that felt like having access to a hidden dimension of performance. During the 2010 finals against Boston, I missed 18 shots in one game. Most players would have been mentally broken. But because I had separated my identity from both success and failure, I took the next shot with the same clean mental state as the first. This isn't about forgetting mistakes. It's about understanding that each moment exists independently from the one before it. The most dangerous aspect of this technique is what happens when you master it. You begin to crave pressure situations. Where others see threat, you see clarity. Where they feel fear, you feel focus. This shift fundamentally changes how you approach challenges in every area of life. You no longer hope for easy paths. You deliberately seek the difficult ones because they offer the purest environment for this mental state. But remember, the assassin's mindset isn't about eliminating emotion. It's about choosing which emotions serve the moment and which don't. Before my final game, I felt everything: gratitude, sadness, excitement, nostalgia. I acknowledged each one, then channeled them into a singular focus that allowed me to score 60 points on my turn. The forbidden technique isn't suppressing your humanity. It's harnessing it so completely that you become a perfect expression of your deepest intention. The greatest warriors don't just study their opponents, they study themselves. The third forbidden technique I mastered was something I never spoke about publicly: weaponized self-awareness. This technique began with a painful realization early in my career. After being swept by the Spurs in the 1,999 playoffs, I locked myself in a hotel room for 2 days. Not to sulk, but to confront the hardest truth any competitor faces. Sometimes the biggest obstacle to your greatness is your own psychology. Most people treat their weaknesses like shameful secrets, hiding them even from themselves. I did the opposite. I created what I called my shadow map. a brutally honest inventory of every mental and physical limitation I possessed. Not to beat myself up, but to create the most detailed blueprint for my own evolution. This wasn't just listing weaknesses. It was studying them with the cold precision of a scientist, understanding not just what they were, but why they existed. After losing to Boston in the 2008 finals, I spent the entire offseason obsessed with one question. What part of my mental approach broke down under pressure? I reviewed every possession, not for strategic mistakes, but for mental patterns. I discovered that my competitive fire sometimes narrowed my court vision in crucial moments. Instead of denying this tendency or being ashamed of it, I designed specific mental triggers to catch myself in these moments and reset my perspective. The forbidden nature of this technique lies in its requirement for absolute emotional honesty. Most people can't bear to look at their flaws without judgment, without the protective cushion of excuses or justification. But in that raw, unfiltered acknowledgement lies unimaginable power. When you can face your deepest insecurities without flinching, you develop an immunity to the psychological warfare that breaks most competitors. My teammates saw this technique in action, though they didn't understand its source. Before critical games, I would sometimes become unusually quiet. They thought I was getting in the zone. What I was actually doing was running through my shadow map, mentally rehearsing how I would respond when my specific weaknesses were tested. Because they inevitably would be. The 2009 and 2010 championships weren't won just through talent or even hard work. They were won because I had developed such intimate knowledge of my own psychological patterns that nothing an opponent did could surprise me more than what I had already prepared for in my own mind. When Dwight Howard tried to intimidate me physically in the 2009 finals, I had already rehearsed that exact scenario hundreds of times in my mental practice. This technique transforms your relationship with failure. Instead of seeing mistakes as indictments of your worth, you see them as invaluable data points in the ongoing experiment of your potential. Each error becomes not something to avoid, but something to study, to learn from, to integrate into your evolving mental model. This shift alone separates world-class performers from everyone else. The ability to derive strength from the very experiences that break others. Most people train to win games. I train for something else entirely. The fourth forbidden technique is what I privately call the Immortality Project, a psychological framework that completely transforms how you view the connection between daily actions and legacy. This isn't about fame or even being remembered. It's about transcending the limitations of conventional thinking about achievement. During my rehabilitation from the Achilles injury in 2013, I had a revelation while studying ancient Japanese samurai texts. These warriors didn't just train for the next battle. They trained with the understanding that each movement, each decision, each moment of discipline was creating something that extended beyond their physical existence. They weren't just practicing techniques. They were cultivating a state of being that would outlive them. I began approaching each workout, each game, each interaction through this lens. The question wasn't, how will this help me win? But how will this action contribute to the body of work that becomes my legacy? This subtle shift completely transforms your relationship with mundane moments. When you're shooting free throws alone at 4:30 a.m., it's not about that specific morning or even the next game. It's about adding another layer to something transcendent. What makes this technique forbidden is that it requires confronting your own mortality directly. Most people avoid thinking about the limited nature of their time. The Immortality Project demands that you not only acknowledge it, but use it as the foundation for every decision. When I decided to score 60 points in my final game, it wasn't a spontaneous performance. It was the culmination of thousands of choices made with the clear understanding that each one was a brushstroke on the canvas I would eventually step away from. The technique has three components. First, clarity of vision. Not just about what you want to achieve, but about what specific impact you want your life's work to have on others. I didn't just want championships. I wanted to demonstrate what's possible when human potential meets relentless will. Second, daily alignment, the disciplined practice of asking whether today's actions are contributing to that vision or diluting it. And third, detached awareness, the ability to care deeply about the process while simultaneously understanding that your work exists beyond you. This approach eliminates the psychological walls between practice and performance. When I worked on footwork drills alone in an empty gym, I approached them with the same intensity as Game 7 of the finals. Not because I was obsessive, but because I understood that those private moments were equally important threads in the tapestry of what would become the Mamba mentality. There was no such thing as just practice or just workout. There was only the ongoing creation of something larger than myself. What separates legends from merely successful people isn't talent or even work ethic. It's this relationship with their own contribution. When you truly internalize that your daily choices are creating something that transcends your individual games, seasons, or even career, you access a source of motivation and clarity that most will never know. You no longer need external validation because you're building something that can't be fully measured by conventional metrics. I've shared 4 forbidden techniques with you: the dark room protocol, the assassin's mindset, weaponized self-awareness, and the immortality project. But there's a 5th technique that bonds them all together. It's the most powerful and the most misunderstood aspect of the Mamba mentality. I call it conscious evolution, the deliberate reconstruction of your identity itself. Most people think the Mamba was just a nickname, a marketing creation, or at most an alter ego I stepped into during games. They're wrong. The Mamba was the result of the most profound psychological transformation an athlete has ever undertaken. It wasn't about becoming a different person on the court. It was about systematically rebuilding myself from the ground up. After Colorado in 2003, I faced the darkest period of my life. Everything I had built was in question: my reputation, my career, my sense of self. I had 2 choices: let circumstances define me or use that crucible to forge something entirely new. I chose the latter. The birth of the Mamba wasn't a rebranding, it was rebirth through fire. This technique begins with a fundamental understanding. Your identity isn't fixed, it's constructed. And what can be constructed can be reconstructed. Most people spend their lives trapped within self-imposed limitations based on an identity they inherited rather than one they consciously created. They say, "That's just who I am," as if their current self is an immutable fact rather than a work in progress. During those solitary pre-dawn workouts, I wasn't just developing skills. I was methodically dismantling the identity I had outgrown and replacing it with one engineered for greatness. I studied everything: how I spoke, how I carried myself, how I processed adversity, how I practiced. Each element was examined, refined, or discarded, and rebuilt with conscious intention. The process was excruciating. Identity is the most intimate aspect of our psychology. Changing it means facing the terror of uncertainty about who you really are. There were moments during those 4 a.m. sessions when I felt completely untethered from myself, floating in the void between who I had been and who I was becoming. Most people retreat from this void. I made it my home. Everything I've shared with you so far, the relationship with discomfort, the mental clarity under pressure, the ruthless self-assessment, the transcendent purpose, these were all components of this larger metamorphosis. They weren't just techniques I used, they were the forge in which I tempered a new self. By 2006, the transformation was complete. People noticed the change but misunderstood its nature. They thought I had become more intense, more focused, more driven. What had actually happened was far more profound. I had achieved something few humans ever attempt, let alone accomplish: the complete conscious recreation of my own identity, aligned perfectly with my deepest values and highest ambitions. This is why no one has truly replicated the Mamba mentality, despite countless attempts. They approach it as a collection of habits or mindset hacks rather than understanding it as a total psychological revolution. They try to add elements of it to their existing identity instead of recognizing that it requires breaking yourself down to your foundation and building something new from those raw materials. The 81-point game wasn't just about scoring. The 5 championships weren't just about winning. The 60-point finale wasn't just about walking away on my terms. They were expressions of this reconstructed self, moments when the fullness of this internal transformation became externally visible. The work had already been done in those dark morning hours, years before. Here's the truth most aren't ready to hear. Greatness isn't about becoming a better version of yourself. It's about having the courage to question who that self really is and the discipline to reconstruct it entirely if necessary. The most forbidden technique isn't what you do, it's who you become. When you watch old footage of me, you're not seeing someone who mastered basketball, you're seeing someone who mastered the art of conscious evolution. The results, the titles, the records, the moments, they were just the visible evidence of the invisible transformation. The true achievement was internal, not external. This is the heart of the Mamba mentality that most miss. It's not about mimicking specific habits or adopting certain attitudes. It's about taking complete ownership of your own psychological evolution. It's about recognizing that your current limitations are self-imposed and that transcending them requires reconstructing the very self that created them. Looking back now at that 17-year-old sitting alone in the darkened high school gym, I realized he wasn't just beginning a basketball journey. He was taking the first step in a profound metamorphosis. He couldn't have imagined the man he would become, the legacy he would create, the lives he would touch. But he had the courage to question who he was and the vision to glimpse who he might become. This is my final question to you. Who might you become if you had the courage to break free from the identity you've inherited? What version of yourself waits on the other side of that transformation? The techniques I've shared aren't just about performance. They're about possibility. The possibility that within you exists a potential far greater than you've allowed yourself to imagine. The secret to the Mamba mentality isn't in what you do. It's in who you become. And becoming isn't an event. It's a process, a daily commitment to conscious evolution that never ends, even when the final buzzer sounds. Because true legends don't just leave behind achievements, they leave behind a blueprint for greatness that inspires others to undertake their own journey of transformation. This is the ultimate forbidden technique, not just playing the game, but changing it entirely through the complete reformation of the self. Not just seeking victory, but becoming the embodiment of excellence itself. Not just leaving a mark, but leaving a legacy that transcends the game altogether. My story isn't about basketball. It never was. It's about the unlimited potential that exists within each of us, waiting to be unleashed through the courage to break free from who we are and the discipline to become who we might be. The question isn't whether you have what it takes. The question is whether you're willing to become what it takes. The Mamba mentality isn't my legacy. It's my invitation. An invitation to undertake your own journey of transformation. An invitation to look beyond the constraints of your current identity and glimpse the greatness that lies dormant within you. An invitation to stop merely playing your game and start consciously evolving into someone beyond even your own imagination. This is what I discovered during those solitary mornings in empty gyms. This is what drove me through 20 seasons of relentless pursuit. And this is what I leave behind. Not just memories of what I achieved, but a roadmap for what you might become if you dare to undertake your own journey of conscious evolution. The techniques are yours now. The choice is yours too. Who will you become?